Hello, trumpet players. Today we're going to talk about what to do with the play-along videos I just posted this week. You may have seen them already, and they're there to help you prepare for the All-State Jazz Improv. So before we talk about that, I want to remind you that we're 10 days away from the classical etudes being announced. So the All-State classical stuff, that's what I call it. The All-State Band, All-State Orchestra. The classical etudes are announced 10 days from today, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to put a link to the book. I have an affiliate account with Sheet Music Plus. I'll put a link to the book in the description. So if you don't have the book for that music yet, you can get it right away. But we're going to be doing that stuff in this video series. So if you're looking forward to more all-state preparation videos, click on subscribe. Anyway, so now let's talk about these videos I posted this week. They're kind of boring, right? It's just a blank screen kind of with the track running. But what I did is I slowed down the progression for the all-state cut to half tempo, and then 2/3 tempo, and then the last one is 82% of the tempo. And what this is supposed to do is get you prepared without having to actually use the track. The track is kind of hard. If you haven't done a lot of improvisation, that track can be a little bit intimidating, right? So this is to help you get over that intimidation and actually have some halfway decent improvisations over that track. So before we get into what to do with it, I need to tell you the way I teach jazz improvisation is probably different from the way you have ever heard before. And if you're a teacher watching this, it's safe to assume that the way I teach is also different from the way you teach. Because I don't start my students off with learning the chords. And that's the approach that we're going to use. My approach for this video, obviously. And if it seems so very different, it's because the entire structure of how I teach beginners how to improvise is different. Okay? So, and that applies, of course, to the etudes. What I'm going to share today is very similar to what I'm doing with my students. Okay? My students get more than just this, but of course they're going to get this. All right? This is where we start. So, let me explain a little bit about the difference real quick. First of all, I don't believe that one way to do it is right and the other way to do it is wrong. My way to do it works. And I'm not saying that because it works, everybody else does what they do wrong. I'm not saying that, but my way of doing it works, okay? Now, what is my way? You can basically summarize the traditional music education world approach to jazz improvisation as a vertical approach. And while I believe in being able to do, as a jazz player, being able to play vertically, that is a much more difficult task than being able to play horizontally. So I like to start with the easy stuff with the students, right? So we start the students with the horizontal stuff, not with the vertical stuff. I don't even want my students to know what the chords are. That's for later. By the way, if you need help with the improv, that's why I'm making this video. If you don't need help with the improv, you don't need to be watching this video. I hope that makes sense, okay? So I'm not talking about players who already have skills. This is not for you if you already have skills. This video, those tracks that I uploaded this week, and this video is for those who really struggle with the improvisation. So we're taking it all the way back to what's easiest, and that's the horizontal improvisations. You can play, all great players play horizontally and vertically. And that should be all of our goals, is to play both, improvise both vertically and horizontally. It's just that the horizontal stuff is easier. So why would you start the beginners with vertical improvisation? So no, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in bombarding students with chord progressions from the very beginning like that. So, let me see what I have here. It's a legitimate way to play. It's a legitimate way to improvise in jazz. I know that it's boring to listen to, and the reason it's boring is because it's only, it's like one-sided. There's no texture, there's no development. When you play just horizontally, the music doesn't go anywhere. So yes, it is boring, and that's why we try to do the horizontal and the vertical stuff, a mixture of both, because that way it's not so static and boring. Okay? Why, if it's boring to listen to, why do I recommend my students do that? Well, because playing something that's boring is a lot better than trying to do something that's not boring and failing at it badly. So I promise you that only 1 or 2 students per year, from when I was judging, played the vertical stuff well enough that I could say, yes, that sounds good. The rest try to play vertically and sound horrible. Because what happens when you do the vertical stuff is it chokes you up. Because you don't know, most of the time when you're a beginner, you try to play vertically, you don't know where you are in the chord progressions, and you lose it. Right? It creates so much anxiety in the musician. When you play horizontally, it frees you up. It makes you free. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's look now at how to apply this horizontal approach to this etude. This is the Take the A Train etude, right? Not sure why they call that an etude, but we'll go with that. Now, before you do this, I want you to improvise as if you're playing a ballad in the key of D. That's what key this etude is in. So play like a ballad. And when you're improvising like that, try to hit every note in the scale along the way, because we want to make sure. Oh, and by the way, if you can't improvise like freely rubato over just the D major scale, C concert, then because of your limitation on that scale, then master that scale first. Play patterns over the scale, play the Clark studies over that scale. You know what I used to do is I used to go through the Clark studies and only take the ones in the key I'm working on. So in this case, you would do the second Clark study, only the ones in D. The third Clark study, only the ones in D. Wonderful way to practice the Clark book. Anyway, moving on. What's next? After you can do a ballad like rubato improvisation on just the scale, we want to put on the 50% track. You can link to it here. Put on the 50% track and play only in the key of D. And I know That's not how the song works. I have to say that rule right away, otherwise the jazz police are gonna be like, "Oh, you can't do that." Well, yes, you can if it's just an exercise. This tune, if the look, depending on the way you look at it, can be justified as no key change. You can look at it as everything is in D. So there are only certain sections where the notes may not line up. So the first time you go through, I want you to go through at only playing, it's the 50% tempo, and only play notes from the D major scale. Okay? That's a very important point. Then we're going to add, so do that, I would say do that 4 or 5 times through the track, just to be safe. And part of the reason why we're doing this is so that you can, along the way, hear where those notes that don't line up are in the progression. See, that's the nice thing about playing horizontally, is you get to play by ear a little bit more. Instead of playing by your conscious mind, you know, some mental feat that you've done, some crazy, brilliant activity, right? Which, that's how we see people who play vertically. When you play horizontally, you can relax and play by ear. Okay, if that note doesn't sound good at that place in the tune, don't play that note. All right, we're gonna get beyond that in a little bit, but yeah, for now, that's the reason why we're gonna improvise just on the key of D. It's part of that is so you hear where those clashing notes are. Now, the next step, still on the 50%. Oh, by the way, do not, when you're doing the 50% one, there's a couple things I want you to follow. Do not double time. Stick to the 50%, because what we're trying to do also is train your muscle memory. If you double time now, your muscle memory is going to be skewed from the tune. Remember, what we're trying to do is get ready for that track, the official track. Excuse me, the official track for the improv. So yeah, don't double time. Don't play 16th notes. Play 8th notes, because that's mostly 8th notes. I mean, you can play other notes besides 8th notes, but the majority of your rhythm should be 8th notes, creating 8th note lines. All right, so don't, just because the tempo is slow, don't double time it, don't play faster, don't get impatient, because we want that. It's just like playing a piece of music half tempo, except that we're improvising. Okay, so the next thing I want you to do, I want you to draw out the measures, right? Get a piece of manuscript paper, draw out 4 measures per line. And in the 3rd and 4th measure, I want you to pencil in G sharp and A sharp. And then the next, so that's 4, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. In measures 11 and 12, do the same thing again. Pencil in G sharp and A sharp. Then in measure 16, I want you to pencil in C natural. Then we have 17, 18, 19, 20. Measure 21 and 22, I want you to pencil in G sharp. 23, 24, measure 25, 26, measure 27 and 28, I want you to pencil in one more time G sharp and A sharp. So this next time you go through these tracks, I want you to, still thinking in the terms of playing in the key of D, C concert, still thinking like that, but I want you to add those notes that you wrote in at those spots. Now you could say, but Mr. Lewis, isn't that playing vertical? Yes, it's a hint of playing vertically. It's a hint of playing vertically, but your thoughts are still aligned horizontally. You're still, the underlying thought, the underlying process is still horizontal, but you're gonna like look at certain parts of the journey. You're gonna look at those notes, look at these notes. All right. When you can do that with eighth notes, doesn't have to be like runs of 20 or 58 notes. You can do just, short runs. But when you can hit those notes, when you feel confident hitting those notes and playing eighth notes and sticking to the key, then you go to the 66%, the 2/3 tempo, and do the same thing on that. Then when you feel like the eighth notes are running at 2/3 tempo, go to the 82% and do it the same way on that. And then finally, when you feel comfortable with 82%, then you can go to the actual audition track, and you should be very close to playing halfway decent improvisation solos on that track. Much better than you would have done if you were trying to play the chord progressions. All right. Now remember, I'm going to remind you one more time, this advice is not for people who can already improvise. This advice is for people who are struggling, who don't know what to do, who sound bad every time they improvise. If you have more skills than what it takes to do what I just described, then this advice is not for you, okay? But I would recommend that if you have friends that are struggling with it, send them the link to this video because this will help them. I've never had a student, I've had so many jazz students come to me frustrated. They can't get started. Every time they try to play, they get frustrated, flustered. They build up huge amounts of anxiety, and it's because they're trying to start with Mount Everest. Playing vertically, inside vertical playing is the hardest type of playing that we do as jazz players. It's the most difficult stuff. So I don't believe in starting with that. We start with what I just described to you. Improvise in the key. That's what horizontal playing is. You're improvising in the key. You can use your ears to play the changes, but the underlying structure to your thoughts is I'm playing in this key. And you're fortunate this year because you can do that on the A-Train Etude and be halfway decent at it. Don't let, because the chords look, if you look at the chords, it's kind of, if that's the way you're looking, it's kind of, not really, really advanced, but it's kind of advanced, right? If you're looking at it that way. But when you're looking at it this way, not much advanced at all. It's just in the key of D. Some people would say, no, it's not. The bridge goes to G. Except that you can play the sharp 11 over the G, and you could just look at the D7 before that as a secondary dominant, right? For those of you who would like to argue about that. So technically, it doesn't have to be the bridge doesn't have to be a key change. Same is true, by the way, for the E7 chords. Those don't necessarily justify a full-fledged key change. Now, here's the beauty of it. You can play it as a full-fledged key change. You can switch keys at the bridge. You can switch keys at the E7 chord. And it creates beautiful music when you do. I'm not saying thou shalt not do that. I'm not saying that students shouldn't try to do that. I'm saying you should walk before you run. Learn to play in the key first. Then you can try to change keys, modulate. By the way, I do believe that modulating is the first step to vertical playing. Before you learn how to read chord progressions, and I have a different way of approaching chord progressions, a very different way. I think it's a much better way, although otherwise I wouldn't be teaching it that way, right? Um, I think the students that learn it my way end up being able to read chord progressions and improvise vertically much more efficiently, much more masterfully, okay? But when the students go through my system, we do key changes first. The skill that it takes to change keys is the same skill it takes to read chords. So we start completely horizontal and we gradually work our way to the more vertical plane. Anyway, that's what I have for you. Use these tracks as a way to inch your way into the final audition track. And I've been putting up the links up to the side. I forgot to mention it earlier. Every time I mention 2/3 tempo, then it's going to be up in that corner, okay? Anyway, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I know that this is a very different way. What I want to do is invite all of you who have been struggling to improvise. I want to invite every single one of you to use this system the way I just described to you and get back with me with the results. Tell me down in the results below. Tell me, with the comments below. Tell me what your results were. Were you able to play halfway decent solos? Is it easier for you? And I'm sure it will be, but I would like to hear from you. Is it easier for you to improvise if you're not trying to follow the chords? All right. I would really love to hear from you about that. And I would also love to hear from any of you teachers out there that think I'm absolutely wrong about this. Please feel free to say so. I don't mind talking about this. I'm not afraid to discuss what I have, what my system is. So anyway, very good. God bless you guys. Good luck with your work. And we'll see you on the next video.